Hello, bonjour, and welcome to your new Bonheur Private Wines video. To be honest, when I open a bottle of wine, I'd rather have it be drunk entirely that same day than put it in the fridge for the day after. And perhaps it is because I am a bit of an old school Frenchman who likes to share a bottle and make sure everyone's thirst is quenched before the end of the night, and maybe because I only drink good wine and it's hard to resist. Well, this might be true. Well, still, even I can see why, and I find myself in that position too sometimes when I've just opened a bottle of wine and I just wanted a glass or two out of it for the night. That's on a weekday, or when we've just opened the last bottle at a dinner party and everyone happens to be leaving shortly after, or perhaps because I just opened a few bottles for a video or to write an article and I can't drink them all. Anyways, even I myself find myself in that position, in that situation where I have to keep bottles half empty, or maybe rather half full. I'd rather see it that way for a little while. So let's answer this important question: how long does wine lasts for after it's been opened? Let's go. And before we dive into how long you can store an open bottle of wine for, we need to discuss the conditions under which this is going to be done, because of course how you store the bottle of wine will impact how long it'll last for. That's obvious. So the most common question, and perhaps the main one, is fridge or no fridge? Do you put it in the fridge or not? It might be arguable for some, but for me it's very simple. It's all wines go in the fridge. Let me explain. Whites and rosés, and also the sparklings, are definitely to be stored in the fridge, since you generally serve them chilled anyways. For me also, and that's where contention may happen. For some, I don't think so, but for me, reds go in the fridge as well. A cold temperature will essentially do two things for your wine. One, it'll slow down the chemical reactions affecting the quality of your wine due to oxidation. That will destroy the aromas slowly of your wine. It will make your wine smell and taste a little bit funny. It'll impact the structure of your wine, etc. But secondly, it'll also slow down the biological development of microorganisms in the wine, the acidic bacteria in particular, that transform alcohol into acetic acid and slowly turn your wine into vinegar. So slower temp means less growth, slower growth and slower metabolism for those microorganisms, just like for milk, yogurt and any type of foods, really. To be perfectly clear, you can't really get poisoned by drinking a wine that would be a bit off or too old, because this is a vegetal product, not an animal product. Just like you won't get really sick if you eat a rotten apple, but you might get seriously ill if you eat an old meat, for example. That can be seriously dangerous. Of course, if you drink a lot of vinegary wine, too much of it, perhaps it'll make you sick to your stomach, but it won't kill you. Plus, no one would really drink too much of a very bad wine. Anyways, anyone that's just a little reasonable wouldn't do that. Although I'm not a doctor, so this is not medical advice, of course, but just my opinion. So simply, every bottle of wine goes in the fridge, because it'll preserve it better. If it's red and you don't want to serve it too cold once you enjoy it again, just take it out of the fridge half an hour prior and you'll be perfectly fine. Also, you want to obviously seal the bottle of wine before putting it in the fridge with the original cork or with a stopper if you have one. Or you definitely need to do that, because it'll mean, one, less oxygen, less oxidation for your wine, less oxygen going into the bottle, so less spoilage, and number two, it'll decrease the risk of your wine taking bad smells from the fridge environment. There's alcohol in there, so it tends to sort of suck in some of these bad smells that can be in your fridge. It's simple. Simply everything in the fridge with a cork on or a stopper on. But let's have a look how long you can keep those wines for reasonably and expect them to be reasonably good. And here, rather than giving you a long list of different storage lengths for each type of wine, let's make it very simple, because it actually is. Let's say that most wines can be kept for say 1 to 3 days in the fridge and remain fairly good after that. How fast they will deteriorate within this period of time will depend on how full the bottle is. A fuller bottle, just like this one, will hold up better than a nearly empty one, that's obvious. It'll also depend on the type of wine you have. So those wines that can live for around 3 days in the fridge are the full-bodied whites, the reds and the sparklings. Of course, most wines will taste better and closer to the original taste at opening day +1 than at opening day +3. Now, finer wines tend to hold up better because they're more concentrated to start with and more balanced, more importantly to start with, so they stay, say, composed for longer. You find that some wines can actually taste better after a day of aeration. You might have experienced this, getting back to a wine you've just left in the fridge for a day, and it seems it tastes better than the day before. But that's really hard to know beforehand, really hard to predict. So I can't really give you a rule of thumb on that. Sparklings are protected from oxidation by the CO2 in the bottle, the bubbles, but they tend to lose their fizziness and turn really flat, especially if there's really not much left in the bottle. So I'd recommend to finish them off the next day if you can, or maybe the day after that, maybe 2 days after, but not much beyond that. Or you can just have to force yourself to have a little glass of champagne every night if you have some leftover champagne. Before dinner, a little glass, it won't do no harm. If you find yourself in that very difficult position, that's what I'd recommend you doing. Now, the wines that will hold a little longer are those very simple wines, those thirst-quenching and light-bodied whites, and also the rosés. Those haven't got a lot of aromas to start with, and they contain generally more sulfites, this preservative antioxidative agent that helps protect those wines. They have a lot of acidity as well, which helps. They also have essentially less to be destroyed by oxidation. So they will stay relatively similar because they were relatively neutral to start with. They will remain simple and refreshing, so 5 to 7 days max for those types of light-bodied white wines and the rosés. Some wines can hold their quality for a few weeks after opening, but those are not your everyday table dry wines, but rather fortified wines, so wines that have been fortified by addition of alcohol. Generally, those are sweet aperitif or dessert wines like the ports, the sherries, or fortified muscats, and that's because they contain a lot more alcohol, generally around 17 to 20%, which protects them from spoilage, and also because those styles are generally oxidized voluntarily at the winery before bottling, because that's the style they come in, so they withstand further oxidation. They're oxidized to start with. Finally, the bag-in-box wines are generally given to be good for about a month after you crack them open. It could be more if it's one of those really light-bodied, refreshing, simple styles like the whites and the rosés, maybe up to 6 weeks. That should be fine. And there you have it. It's very simple. This was your straightforward guide to how long you can store an bottle of wine for. At some point in our video series, I'll also cover the different preservation systems that exist for open bottles of wine. So stay tuned. In the meantime, have a good day, have a good glass of wine. For me, I will certainly for you. Enjoy, and I will see you soon in the wonderful world of wine. Cheers.